Maria stood still, her eyes fixed on Sophia, her daughter-in-law. The words Sophia had just spoken felt like a knife driven straight into her heart. We will have to put up with her for the rest of our lives. The room instantly filled with laughter, with judging glances, and Maria, despite all her restraint, felt as if everything around her was collapsing. This was her son Ben's wedding, the event she had spent millions preparing for, carefully arranging every single detail. Everything had been perfect, except for this painful truth. Sophia, the beautiful bride in her pure white wedding dress, pointed toward Maria while her entire family burst into laughter, completely unaware that the woman standing before them was not just a single mother. Maria said nothing, she simply remained silent. She had grown used to being looked down upon. But tonight, things would not remain the same. The smile on Maria's face was not a sign of submission. It was a sign of a deep determination, a determination that even Sophia could not possibly imagine. After her husband passed away, Maria had carried every burden alone. From raising her son Ben to building a career in the fiercely competitive real estate industry. She had never wanted her child to feel deprived of anything, and now she had built a powerful empire with nothing but her own hands and her mind. Yet Sophia, her daughter-in-law, knew none of this. Sophia only saw Maria through the narrow lens of a widowed mother, someone without wealth, without power. Maria felt anger rising inside her. The tears she had held back for so long suddenly threatened to spill out. Everything she had done for this family, for her son, was now being trampled on during the most important day of Ben's life. But instead of letting emotion cloud her mind, Maria did something unexpected. She did not answer. She did not react. She simply smiled. A cold smile. For the first time in many years, Maria felt an inner strength she had never truly recognized before. It was not just patience, it was power. Maria was not simply a mother. She was the chairwoman of a massive real estate empire, a woman who could change the fate of an entire family in a single moment. But no one in that room knew it. No one in Sophia's family realized that Maria, the woman they believed to be weak, was actually the one holding the key. She turned away and walked out silently while the laughter continued behind her. In that brief moment, Maria caught sight of James Harrison, Sophia's father, a man she knew very well. He was standing there, his face pale, staring at her with clear shock in his eyes. Maria gave a gentle smile, then spoke calmly. "Congratulations to my daughter-in-law, Sophia. I am sure we will be seeing each other much more often." Her words were soft, yet filled with authority. The crowd in the room fell silent. No one dared to say a word. All eyes turned toward Maria, but she did not care. She walked out of the room with steady steps, as if she had finally found freedom. In a single moment, everything had changed. Their disrespect no longer held any meaning. Once outside, Maria took out her phone. A message from her assistant appeared on the screen. "Board meeting on Monday, on schedule." Maria was not surprised. She had planned this long ago. That would be the moment when she would officially take control of the power in her hands. No longer the widowed mother who was looked down upon, but a woman capable of changing an entire empire. Maria looked into the vast darkness of the night and felt a calm settle in her heart. From this moment on, everything would be different. People would have to see her in a completely new way. "Monday on schedule," Maria whispered, her eyes shining as if she were stepping into a new battle. No one would ever dare to underestimate her again. In that single moment, Maria realized she had been wrong to believe that silence would make everything pass. Sophia's words, the open mockery in the middle of her son's wedding, made her understand that sometimes silence is only a sign of weakness. And she, Maria, was not a weak woman. She had once lived in loneliness, had once faced every storm on her own. But tonight, she would not remain silent anymore. Maria stepped out of the wedding hall. Even though her heart was boiling with emotions, she could barely contain. Behind her, the crowd was still filled with cheerful laughter, but in that moment, Maria was the only one who could not smile. She walked quickly into the courtyard and stopped beside a sleek black car parked along the curb. Her hands tightened into fists. At that moment, Maria felt truly alone in a world she had helped build, yet was still looked down upon by the very people within her own family. But she could not remain trapped in disappointment forever. Maria knew she could not change what had already happened. But she could change the future. She was tired of living under the shadow of a single mother, a fragile widow in the eyes of others. Now it was time for her to become someone the whole world would respect. As Maria drove home, she began thinking about every sacrifice she had endured. She had raised Ben alone after her husband passed away. Every day, she faced pressure from work while carrying the responsibility of a real estate empire worth billions. Yet she had never once complained. She had only one purpose: Ben, her son, the person she loved more than anything. But now Ben saw her as a burden, and Sophia, the arrogant daughter-in-law, had delivered the most painful blow. When she arrived home, Maria walked into her study, where everything remained quiet as usual. She turned on her computer and looked at the financial reports of the corporation. Although the events at the wedding still lingered in her mind, Maria could not stop. She had spent her entire life building Harrison Industries, and she would not allow anyone to overturn everything just because of foolish words. Working through the night, Maria prepared her plan for the meeting on Monday morning, when she would officially sit in the chair of the chairperson of Harrison Industries. For many years, she had quietly acquired the majority of the company's shares, and now that the opportunity had arrived, she would not let it slip away. No one knew that Maria, the single mother, the widow, was actually the one holding the real power. No one knew that when Maria stepped into that meeting room, everything would change forever. When dawn arrived, Maria was ready. She wore a black suit, her hair neatly tied back, her face lightly made up yet sharp and confident. Looking at herself in the mirror, she saw not only a strong woman, but a true leader, someone capable of turning an entire empire around. Maria arrived at the Harrison Industries office exactly at 8 in the morning. James Harrison was already there, his face pale as if he had not slept all night. When Maria entered the room, James quickly stood up, trying to maintain a polite attitude. But Maria did not even look at him. She walked straight to the chair of the chairperson, sat down, and began opening the financial reports. "James," Maria began, her voice calm yet filled with firm determination, "today we will talk about the future of this company. What you call your family's legacy is in fact nothing more than a pile of debt and a series of terrible decisions." James slowly sat down, his hands trembling. He could not believe what was happening. Maria, the woman he had always considered an ordinary widow, was the one who had quietly taken control of his family's company. He did not know how to react, but Maria did not give him time to hesitate. "You no longer control this company," Maria said, her eyes cold as stone. "From now on, every major decision will have to go through me." Meanwhile, Sophia, standing behind him, could not hide her shock. She could not understand what was happening. She had always believed Maria was just a simple mother with no real power except money. But now she realized everything had changed. Maria was not the weak one. It was Sophia who had been wrong to underestimate this woman. Maria continued without hesitation, pointing out the mistakes in the way the Harrison family had managed the company for many years. "This company is standing on the edge of collapse," Maria said, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "And I will do everything to save it, but not in the way your family has been running it." Sophia and James could only remain silent, unable to argue. Everything had become painfully clear, and now they had only one choice left: to follow Maria's decisions. Maria then stood up and walked out of the room with a faint smile. She did not need to say anything more. Everything had already been decided. Maria stood by the office window, the morning light illuminating the cold determination on her face. Early morning in Chicago looked quiet, yet full of energy, much like her own spirit. The night before, she had planned the next steps of her life. Everything was ready, and now it was time for her to truly step into the battle, a battle that no one in the Harrison family, including James and Sophia, could have predicted. She sat down at her desk, her hand gliding across the documents of Harrison Industries, the company James Harrison had run for many years, yet allowed to fall into stagnation. Everything, from property valuation to business strategy, lacked creativity and failed to keep up with the modern era. Maria, a woman who had built her own real estate empire, understood that if she wanted to save this company, she would have to change everything. "We need a revolution," Maria thought. She was tired of outdated methods, tired of James's stubborn conservatism and the quiet corruption running through his family. She could no longer live in the shadow of others. She was not the fragile widow the world had once believed her to be. Maria knew that only she could create this change. On the first morning after Maria officially took over the company's leadership, all the employees gathered in the large hall of Harrison Industries. Unfamiliar faces looked at her from a distance, unsure who she was, knowing only that their new boss had come from somewhere outside the Harrison family. The room fell silent when she walked in, every eye turning toward her. Maria stepped onto the stage and held the microphone in her hand. She did not need to say too much. Her actions would prove everything. "Good morning," Maria said, her voice steady and fearless. "Today is the first day of a new era for Harrison Industries. We will not continue following the old path. I am not here to protect the so-called legacy this family has built. I am here to save this company from collapse." The crowd before her seemed uneasy, their eyes filled with doubt. They had grown used to James's conservative management, and none of them believed that Maria, a woman from outside the Harrison family, could accomplish what she was promising. But Maria knew that nothing was impossible when she held enough power, and now she possessed everything she needed to change the situation. She continued speaking, her voice strong and decisive. "I will begin by reevaluating the entire structure of this company. Employees who lack competence will be replaced, and those who remain will have to prove they deserve to stay. I want everyone to understand that from this moment on, there will be no place in this company for stagnation or lazy habits." When she finished speaking, the hall fell into complete silence. The people there were still stunned by what they had just heard. To them, Maria was a stranger, someone from outside who had never been part of the Harrison family's world. But Maria did not care about their hesitation. She knew that change was never easy. Maria walked out of the room, her expression unwavering. She noticed James standing in the corner, his eyes filled with confusion and anger. He had once believed that maintaining the old habits was enough to run the company, but now everything had changed. Maria was not someone who could be easily controlled. When she returned to her office, she immediately began working on the restructuring plans. She decided to cut unnecessary expenses, change the way departments operated, and restructure the entire organization. Every decision she made aimed to remove the obstacles that were blocking the company's growth. Maria had prepared a comprehensive reform that no one could have imagined. Throughout the following week, she organized meetings with different departments across the company. Step by step, she began removing employees who could not meet the new standards, replacing them with people who possessed real ability, creativity, and the willingness to innovate. Those who remained would have to work harder if they did not want to be replaced. Maria allowed no compromise to influence her decisions. One day, she sat down with James and the shareholders on the board of directors. James was still there, his eyes anxious as he faced this enormous transformation. Maria looked at him coldly. "James," she said calmly yet with unmistakable authority, "you have managed this company in your own way, but now it is time for me to do it my way." James attempted to argue, but Maria was already too familiar with men like him. He was simply too conservative, too afraid to change, and to face the serious problems the company was confronting. Maria did not even need to continue the argument. She already controlled the entire situation. The next day, she announced major restructuring decisions and sent notices to shareholders and employees stating that all company decisions would now be approved and implemented under her supervision. Maria was no longer the woman standing behind the curtain. She was the one truly holding power, and no one could stop her. Maria had reached the position she had always wanted. No one could underestimate her anymore. She was not a weak woman. She was a powerful leader ready to transform everything to save the empire she had built. She had stepped into this battle, and now everyone would have to face Maria, the woman whose power no one had ever expected. Maria sat quietly in her office as the late afternoon light slipped gently through the glass windows, revealing tiny specks of dust floating in the air. On her desk, the financial reports of Harrison Industries were neatly arranged. She studied the numbers, the charts, the streams of data, and they did not lie. What she saw was the result of a lack of creativity, stagnation, and poor management. She was no longer surprised, yet a sense of irritation still rose within her. This corporation, despite its famous name and enormous assets, was standing dangerously close to collapse. Maria let out a quiet sigh and slowly ran her hand across the stacks of documents. She had already known that this company no longer possessed the ability to grow as it once had. Harrison Industries was facing deep-rooted problems that James Harrison, even as the man in charge, either failed to recognize or refused to confront. But Maria, standing outside and observing carefully, could clearly see every weakness the Harrison family had ignored for so many years. Blind investments in traditional real estate had exhausted their potential. Ineffective leasing contracts continued to drain resources, and conservative business strategies could not keep up with the rapidly shifting market. What remained was stagnation, outdated business relationships, and money slowly slipping away. She could not accept that. She could not allow people like James and his family to continue destroying a company over which she now held a significant share of power. Maria stood up and walked toward the window, looking out across the city. There was not the slightest trace of regret in her heart. All she needed to do was change the way the company operated, a revolution. Not a loud, dramatic revolution, but a deep transformation from within, step by step. She did not only want to save Harrison Industries, she wanted to turn it into a powerful empire, a leader in the real estate industry. And to achieve that, Maria would have to eliminate unnecessary elements, the outdated habits that the Harrison family had preserved for far too long. Her plan began with changing the management structure and even replacing some of the people holding key positions in the company. She had already decided to invite industry experts, people with fresh perspectives, to help lead Harrison Industries into a new era. Everything would change, and Maria would be the one directing every decision. She had waited her entire life for this moment. That evening, after gathering enough information, Maria sat down with the members of the board of directors. She knew this would be a real battle. Most of these people had been loyal to the Harrison family for years, and they would not easily accept change. But Maria was not worried. She understood clearly that true change always brings resistance. Everything had to begin here. The meeting opened in a tense atmosphere. Every eye in the room turned toward Maria, the only woman present, an outsider, yet the one holding the greatest power. James Harrison sat silently, his expression filled with concern. He already knew that nothing would remain the same. Maria was decisive, and no one could stop her. "We are going to begin a comprehensive reform," Maria said, her voice strong yet calm. "Harrison Industries will no longer be a place that exists only to preserve old relationships. We will not continue following conservative strategies." James Harrison opened his mouth but could not speak. He knew this was not the first time Maria had shown her strength, but this time it was different. Maria was now controlling not only the company, but in many ways, the fate of his entire family. "We will renew everything," Maria continued, her gaze moving across each person in the room. "From major strategic decisions to small changes in everyday work, everything must be rebuilt from the beginning." One of the shareholders, an older man, spoke up in opposition. "We cannot change everything overnight. This company has operated this way for many years," Maria answered without hesitation. "Then, sir, it is precisely that way of operating that has brought us to the edge of collapse. If you still wish to maintain those old habits, I am afraid there will be no future to continue." The atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Arguments began to rise, but Maria remained patient. She had prepared everything in advance. New strategies, restructuring plans, every detail had been carefully designed. Maria understood that if she wanted to build a strong future for Harrison Industries, she had to remove weak elements and restructure the company from within. Finally, James fell silent, lowering his head. He understood that resistance was pointless. Maria was now the one in control. "Then it is settled," Maria said as she concluded the meeting. "We will start again from the beginning. I will oversee the entire reform process, and those who cannot adapt will have to leave. Harrison Industries will return stronger than ever." As the members of the board slowly left the room, Maria remained seated alone. Everything was beginning to change. She had not only changed this company, she had also changed the way the Harrison family saw her. From a woman once looked down upon, Maria had become the one directing every decision, the one holding the key to the company's future. Maria stood up and looked out the window, feeling as if she had just overcome a great challenge. But she knew that her journey had only just begun. The next morning, Maria woke earlier than usual. She sat up and looked out the window where the light of early morning was beginning to stretch across the tall buildings. The world outside remained busy as it always was, but for Maria, everything had changed. She had stepped into a battle not only for power, but also for the price of change itself. Every decision, every step she made now would affect not only the company, but the entire Harrison family as well. Maria sat at her desk again, her hand moving slowly across financial reports and the company's restructuring plans. The changes she had introduced were beginning to take effect. Harrison Industries was showing clear signs of transformation, yet every change carried its own cost. The price was not only money, but also disrupted relationships and resistance from the very people within her own family. She could not stop thinking about Ben, her son. Since the wedding, their relationship had grown tense. Ben, the son for whom Maria had given all her love and sacrifices, was slowly becoming a stranger in her eyes. He was no longer the son she had once been proud of, but a dissatisfied man, trying to escape the shadow of a mother who was too powerful. Every time Ben called, he complained about the changes Maria was making, about the tension in the family, about how she was invading his life. One evening, Maria received a call from him. His voice was low and filled with disappointment. "Mom, I don't understand why you have to do all of this. You know our family has always maintained relationships this way. Why are you destroying everything?" Maria sat silently, feeling a powerful wave rising in her chest. She had sacrificed so much so that Ben could have a better life, so he would never have to face the hardships she had endured. Yet now, he did not understand. He failed to see that the changes she was making were not meant to hurt the family but to save it. She wanted Ben to grow, wanted him to stand on his own feet rather than rely on her forever. But that seemed far too difficult for him to accept. "Ben," Maria said gently but firmly, "I am doing this not to break our family, but to make sure it survives. You cannot live in my shadow forever. You must stand on your own and face reality." On the other end of the line, there was silence, followed only by Ben's heavy sigh. Maria could clearly feel the disappointment in his voice, yet she knew that if she did not do this, Ben would never understand the value of independence and the power of shaping his own destiny. No matter how difficult it was, she had to let go. The conversation ended, but Maria could not stop thinking about him. She knew that cutting off his financial dependence was the right decision, yet it made her feel like a mother who was losing her own son. Every time she looked at the old photographs of the two of them, her heart ached. She had spent her entire life sacrificing for him, yet now she had to face a decision that pushed them further apart. But that was the price of power. To build her empire, Maria had to fight not only external enemies, but also confront her own family. Power was never easy to obtain. It demanded sacrifice, sometimes loneliness, and it was not always rewarded with love. Maria had already prepared herself to pay that price, even if others could not understand it. The following morning, Maria faced another important meeting at Harrison Industries. The board of directors gathered to hear reports about the restructuring progress. Maria walked into the meeting room with eyes shining with determination. She knew her decisions over the past days had created waves within the company, but if the company was to grow stronger, she had to remove what no longer belonged. "We must push for even stronger changes," Maria began, her voice firm and unwavering. "This company has lived too long under the shadow of safety. We cannot continue maintaining outdated habits and old strategies. We must step into a new era." Some shareholders were unhappy and objected to the speed of change. But Maria did not care. She had already made her decision, and she would not step back. These people did not understand that the company stood on the edge of collapse, and if nothing changed, everything would fall apart like a castle made of sand. "We will increase investment in new projects and advanced technologies. Projects that fail to generate profit will be eliminated immediately. Maria continued, her eyes sharp as blades. This company will no longer have space for employees who lack ability. We must rise forward. We cannot remain trapped in our comfort zone. Maria looked at the board members sitting silently, unable to protest. She knew they were worried, yet she also knew that no change ever came without a price. She had prepared herself long ago. Power was not something anyone would easily hand to you, but if you were strong enough, you could seize it. And Maria was ready to do whatever it took to reach her goal. When the meeting ended, Maria stood up without hesitation. She had won. Yet she also knew that the price of victory was loneliness. Among all these changes and bold decisions, she began to feel the growing distance from her own son. But she understood that this was the cost of standing at the peak of power. Maria sat in her office as the light from the window shone directly across her face. Outside, the city of Chicago remained busy and restless, yet inside her heart there was a strange quietness. The restructuring at Harrison Industries was progressing well. Every plan had been carried out, and the changes were beginning to show real results. Still, she could not ignore a silent worry growing inside her. The difficulties did not come only from the company, but also from her own family, the very family she had sacrificed everything to protect. Her relationship with Ben was becoming more strained with each passing day. Her son, the person she had always trusted the most, had now become the first to oppose her decisions. Maria felt a sharp ache in her chest whenever she thought about him. Ben was not only resisting the changes in the company, he was also rejecting the way she was managing his life. Maria had decided to stop supporting him financially, and that decision had made everything far more tense. Ben could not accept that his mother refused to help him when he needed it. He was grown now, a man in his own right, yet he still was not independent enough to face the changes Maria had brought into their lives. One evening, while Maria was reviewing financial reports at her desk, her phone vibrated. It was Ben. She did not answer immediately. She simply stared at the screen in silence. Deep inside, she knew this was a call she could not avoid forever. "I want your help. Not because I cannot do things on my own. You know that," Ben said on the phone, his voice filled with hurt and anger. "Why are you doing this, Mom? Why are you creating distance between us?" Maria closed her eyes, trying to steady her emotions. She knew that for many years she had protected Ben too much. She had given him everything: money, opportunities, security, yet now he was using that very support as a weapon against her. The feeling of betrayal was something Maria had never imagined she would experience from her own son. "Ben," Maria said gently but firmly, "I am not helping you anymore because I want you to learn how to stand on your own. You cannot depend on me forever. You are grown now, and it is time for you to take responsibility for your own life." On the other end of the line, Ben remained silent for a long time. Perhaps he could not accept the truth yet. But Maria knew this was the right decision. She had to let her son become independent, even if that meant facing painful emotions herself. It was part of the price of the power she had chosen to carry. Power did not only come from running a company, it also came from the strength to manage family relationships without allowing them to control her decisions. The call ended in heavy silence. Maria placed the phone down and looked at the old family photographs on her desk. She had raised Ben from childhood, had spent her entire life building a future for him, yet now it seemed the greatest thing she could give him was independence. The price of maturity, the price of becoming a leader, was learning to face painful separations, even when that separation involved her own son. The following morning, Maria arrived at the company early. The corporate restructuring was still continuing, but she knew the most important task now was bringing stability. James Harrison remained an unpredictable factor. He had never easily accepted the changes Maria imposed, and Maria could sense that his resistance was more than simple disagreement. James felt he had lost control, and that fear was what drove his opposition. The board meeting took place on Tuesday morning. Maria walked into the room with confidence, though inside she could feel the unavoidable tension in the air. The members of the board fell silent as she entered. They all understood that under Maria's leadership, nothing would ever be the same again. "We will not stop with basic reforms," Maria began, her voice steady and unwavering. I have a long-term plan to transform Harrison Industries into a leading corporation in the real estate industry. And to achieve that, we must change everything, from the organizational structure to our investment strategies. James Harrison remained silent, unable to speak. He knew that if he objected, it would change nothing because Maria already controlled the entire company. Maria continued without acknowledging his silence and turned her attention toward the other shareholders. We will invest in new technologies and expand into markets that have not yet been explored. This company cannot continue relying on outdated relationships. We must innovate if we want to survive and grow stronger. The meeting ended in agreement, although Maria could clearly sense the discomfort lingering in the room. Everyone present understood that Maria had truly taken control, and they would have to follow her lead if they did not want to be left behind. As the others left the meeting room, Maria remained standing alone, gazing out through the office window. Everything she had done was meant to build a strong company. Yet deep inside, she could not ignore the feeling that she had lost so much along the way. Her relationship with Ben was drifting further apart. Even though she had done everything for him, he could not see the sacrifices she had made. Maria sighed softly as the loneliness rose inside her. It was the price of power. Still, she knew that no matter how lonely the path became, she would not stop. This company, and her life itself, would never return to what they once were. She had chosen this road, and now she had to accept every sacrifice that came with it. Maria stood in the large meeting room of Harrison Industries, holding a cup of coffee in her hand while her eyes drifted toward the window. The view outside seemed unchanged, but inside her heart everything was completely different. Every step she took from this moment forward was a struggle, not only against the challenges within the company, but also against her own family, especially Ben. She felt that every decision she made was slowly creating cracks that might never be repaired in the relationship between mother and son. It was painful to face the truth that the very son she had sacrificed her entire life to raise could not understand the reasons behind her decisions. Every time Ben called, he questioned the changes in the company, questioned the changes within the family, and each conversation stirred a storm inside Maria's heart. Yet she could not compromise. She could not step back. As a mother, Maria understood that a parent's love for a child is unconditional. But when you stand in a position of power, things cannot be guided by emotion alone. She had accepted that she must do everything necessary to protect Harrison Industries, and if that meant cutting away part of her family ties, then she would have to face it. Maria pulled a notebook from the drawer and opened it on the desk. In front of her were the plans for restructuring the company, the bold decisions she had made over the past months. The company was moving in the right direction, yet the price of this transformation was enormous. The members of the board of directors no longer saw her as an outsider, but they still could not fully trust the decisions she was making. Everyone in the company, from employees to shareholders, had begun to realize that change does not always produce immediate results. The deep reforms Maria was implementing were difficult for many people to adapt to, and that was a reality she had to confront. One afternoon, after a long, exhausting meeting, Maria remained alone in her office, feeling drained. She had sacrificed so much to reach this position, yet now she felt the weight of loneliness growing heavier. Although the company was moving forward with strength, her family relationships, especially with Ben, were drifting further apart. She remembered the difficult days after her husband passed away, leaving her with a young child and a mountain of debt. Maria had been forced to stand up on her own and begin again from nothing. No one had helped her. She had only herself and her belief in what she could achieve. That was why she could not accept resistance from Ben now. She knew she had done everything for him, for the future of this family, yet Ben could not see it that way. To him, the changes only felt like distance. While Maria sat deep in thought, a message from her assistant startled her. The words read, "Mom, I need to see you." It was from Ben. This time she could not refuse. Maria sensed the confusion behind the message and could not help thinking that this meeting might become an important turning point in their relationship. That evening, Maria waited in the living room, watching the clock as the minutes slowly passed. Finally, Ben walked in. His face looked tired. The confidence he once carried was no longer there. He sat in the chair across from her, unable to look directly into his mother's eyes. Maria said nothing. She simply observed her son quietly. She could clearly see the change in him. Ben was no longer the child she once knew, the boy who always came to her for help. He had grown into a man, yet he did not know how to face life's challenges on his own. "Mom," Ben began, his voice dry and strained, "I know you always want what is best for me, but I cannot live like this forever. You know I am grown now, but what you are doing only pushes me further away from you. You do not understand what I am going through." Maria looked at her son and felt her heart tighten. She had considered cutting off financial support for Ben, but this was the first time she had heard such honest words from him. Pain rose inside her chest, yet Maria knew this was the moment she had to do what she did not want to do. "Ben," Maria said patiently but firmly, "you cannot keep depending on me forever. I have given you everything, material support and opportunities, but you must understand that life is not only about money. You must learn to stand on your own feet." Ben lowered his head and said nothing more. Mother and son sat in heavy silence, the air between them thick with tension. Maria could feel the pain in Ben's heart, but she also knew this was the only way he could truly grow. Even as a mother, she understood that sometimes love is not protection, it is letting go. Eventually, Ben stood up without another word and quietly walked away. Maria remained seated, feeling as though her entire world had just collapsed. She had done everything for her son, yet now she had to face a painful truth. Ben no longer needed her in the way she once believed he would. Their relationship could never return to what it once was. As night fell, Maria sat alone in the living room and looked out through the window. The city outside continued to pulse with life, but inside her heart there was only silence. She had chosen this path, and now she had to face the price of power, loneliness. The next morning, Maria woke earlier than usual, the exhaustion from the previous night still clinging to her. She had not slept at all, her mind filled with worry. Her strained relationship with Ben, the massive changes in the company, and the constant pressure of life made everything feel as if it were slowly breaking apart. Yet she knew that no matter what happened, she could not stop. Maria looked at herself in the mirror and quietly reminded herself that this was a decisive moment. She had to remain strong, and she could not allow herself to weaken. Maria had heard the doubtful voices of those around her for a long time, from James Harrison to even Ben himself. None of them truly understood the necessity of these changes. They could not see the value of the reforms she had carried out. But Maria could not turn back. Her career, the company she was leading, everything depended on the decisions she made now. She walked into her office and gently ran her hand across the latest financial report of Harrison Industries. The numbers had begun to show positive movement, yet it was still not enough. It was only the beginning. Maria still felt that she had not gone far enough. The changes she had implemented over the past week were only a small part of the long-term strategy she had carefully planned. But deep inside her heart, there was something that made her uneasy. Would the decisions she had made truly be enough to save the company, or would they only push it closer to the edge of collapse? She sat down in her chair, her hands tired, her mind spinning. She could not continue living in the shadow of the past, the shadow the Harrison family had placed over her life. She could not remain only a mother, only a widowed wife. Maria wanted to become more than that, yet the price she had to pay was the slow fading of her family relationships. Inside her heart, there remained only a deep exhaustion, and loneliness was quietly settling into her soul. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was Ben. She knew this call could not be avoided, but this time she did not want to hear more accusations from him. She had done everything for him, yet he could not see it. In a brief moment, Maria felt that she had already prepared herself for the confrontation. "I need to see you, Mom," Ben said, his voice heavy with sadness, different from before. Maria sighed and realized this was no longer something she could avoid. She accepted the meeting, although many doubts still remained in her mind. No matter what happened, Ben was still her son, and nothing could ever change that. That afternoon, Maria arrived at the cafe where Ben had chosen to meet. When she walked in, Ben was already sitting in the corner, his eyes filled with sadness. The confidence he once carried was gone, replaced by the look of a tired man with his head resting on his hand. Maria realized that everything had already gone beyond the control of both of them. "I have something I need to say," Ben began, his voice low as if he were holding back a deep sorrow. "Do you know how I feel, Mom? You say I have to stand on my own, but you never gave me the chance to do that. You only help me when you want to, and when I actually need you, you refuse." Maria listened to his words and felt a painful weight in her chest. What he said was not entirely wrong. In truth, she had shielded Ben from many of the challenges he needed to face. She had created a world that was too safe for him, and now she was facing the consequences of that decision. "Ben," Maria said softly yet firmly, "I have protected you all your life. I have given you everything I possibly could. But I cannot live your life for you. You must learn to stand up on your own." Ben remained silent, his eyes filled with disappointment. Maria knew that what she said today would hurt him deeply. Yet she also understood that if she did not say it now, Ben would never realize that life cannot always depend on the support of others. Everyone must take responsibility for their own actions. "Why can't you see that I need you?" Ben asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "It feels like you are pushing me away. You cannot do this to me." Maria did not answer immediately. She simply looked at her son with eyes full of compassion. She had given Ben everything she could, yet now she was facing one of the hardest decisions of her life. "Ben, you have to understand that what I am doing is not because I don't love you. I am doing it because I want you to become independent, because I want you to face reality. You cannot live forever in the world that I created for you." Ben looked directly into his mother's eyes, as if he had suddenly realized something in her words. Slowly, he lowered his head and said nothing more. Maria felt that the silence between them carried a quiet acceptance. Their relationship had changed, and perhaps after this conversation, both of them would begin a new chapter in their lives. Finally, Ben stood up without looking at Maria again. He quietly walked away. Maria remained sitting alone in the cafe, feeling that the storm inside her heart had not yet settled. But she knew she had done the right thing. Her decision was not only for the company, but also for her son. Every change comes with a price, and sometimes that price is a pain that only family members can truly understand. As Maria looked out through the window, she no longer felt the same loneliness. She knew that no matter what sacrifices she had to make, she would continue walking the path she had chosen, and nothing could change that. For the entire past week, Maria could not stop thinking about her meeting with Ben. His words continued to echo in her mind like a quiet wound that never fully healed. Yet she also understood that sometimes love is not only about protection, it is about knowing when to let go. She had spent her entire life doing everything for Ben, but perhaps this was the moment when he had to learn to stand on his own. That morning, when Maria walked into the office, the atmosphere in the company felt more tense than usual. The changes she had implemented over time were beginning to show results, but they had also brought uneasiness to many people within the company. Longtime employees could not easily accept these changes, and that was something Maria had already expected. Day after day, she realized that change does not always bring immediate results. Some employees still held conservative thinking, and quite a few members of the board still did not fully trust her decisions. But that did not make her hesitate. Maria had faced countless challenges throughout her life, and she understood that if you want to change something, you must accept hardship. This time, Maria did not simply want to change the company. She wanted to build a true empire. But to achieve that, she knew she would have to face losses, resistance, and difficult decisions that could not be avoided. One afternoon, while Maria was working in her office, her phone rang again. She looked at the screen and saw a message from Ben. A sense of unease rose inside her, yet she could not deny the truth that their relationship had already changed. She sighed quietly and prepared herself for the meeting that would come. "Mom, I want to talk to you." The message from Ben was short but filled with hidden meaning. "I need you to understand me better." Maria placed the phone down and stared at the documents in front of her, unable to focus. She had already decided that she could not continue protecting Ben forever. But she also knew that those decisions were not easy. She loved her son deeply and had never wanted to create distance between them. Yet now she had to do exactly that. Maria understood that once she gave Ben independence, he would have to face every challenge himself without his mother's protection. That evening, when Maria and Ben met at a small cafe, the tension between them still remained. Ben had not fully accepted what his mother had done. Maria could clearly see the anger in his eyes, but this time she could not avoid it. This meeting would become an important turning point, not only for their relationship as mother and son, but also for both of their lives. "I understand that you did it for me," Ben began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "But do you know how I feel? You do everything for the company, but you forget about me. You forget about the family." Maria could not help sighing. It was true that she had poured enormous time and energy into the company, and sometimes she forgot that she also needed to spend time with her family, with Ben. But she also knew the company could not wait. Harrison Industries was going through a difficult period, and if she did not act immediately, there would be no second chance. "Ben, you have to understand that sometimes change is necessary to achieve something greater," Maria said, her voice calm yet determined. "I do not want you to feel abandoned, but you must understand that life is not always easy. I cannot protect you forever." Ben looked at his mother for a long moment, his eyes uncertain, as if he did not know what to do. "I do not want to live alone, Mom. I just want you to understand me. I cannot always be as strong as you expect me to be." Maria looked into her son's eyes and felt her heart tighten. She realized that perhaps Ben was still not ready to face the world without her help, but she could no longer do everything for him. She had already taught him everything she could. The rest would depend on him. "Ben, you can do this," Maria said, her voice firmer than ever. "You are not a child anymore. You are grown, and it is time for you to take responsibility for your own life." A long silence followed. Ben said nothing more and simply stared at the cup of coffee in his hands. Maria understood that no matter what she said, these words could not change everything instantly. But she also knew that this was a step she had to take, no matter how painful it was. After parting with Ben, Maria felt a quiet loneliness lingering in her heart. She knew she had done the right thing, yet she could not escape the feeling of great loss. Even the strongest mother sometimes finds that letting go is the most painful thing of all. She returned to the company and continued her battle. Everything around her moved forward as usual, but inside Maria something had changed. She had chosen to walk this path, and now she could not turn back. The decisions she made did not only affect the company, they also shaped her relationships with the people she loved most. Yet Maria understood that sometimes change demands a price, and it was a price she had to accept. Maria sat alone in her office as the faint light of evening slipped through the tall windows and fell across the scattered piles of documents on her desk. It was already late at night, yet she could not stop thinking about everything that had happened during the past week. It felt as if everything had reached a turning point. The company was slowly recovering. The reforms she had implemented were beginning to show promising early results, but the situation did not end there. The relationships within her family were still continuing to fracture, especially with Ben. She could not help thinking about the last meeting between the two of them. Ben's words still lingered in her mind. "You cannot understand what I am going through. You only think about the company, and I feel like a failure." Those words had struck her heart like a heavy blow. It was not that Maria did not love her son, but she knew that if she did not remain strong, Ben would never truly grow up. Maria sighed and leaned back in her chair, gazing out through the window where the lights from surrounding buildings reflected onto the streets below, forming broken streaks of brightness across the pavement. At that moment, she felt like a traveler walking through a battle with no final destination. Every decision she made affected not only the company, but also her family, and each step forward felt like a gamble. Her heart still felt heavy, yet she knew that if she did nothing, everything would fall back into stagnation. The people within the company might slowly begin to trust her, but in the eyes of the Harrison family, she was still an outsider. She had not yet gained the respect she deserved. James Harrison, even though he had stepped back to some degree, was still quietly searching for ways to reclaim his influence within the family. And when it came to Ben, she had done everything for him, yet he still could not understand his mother's decisions. Suddenly, Maria's phone rang. It was a message from Ben. "Mom, I want to see you. We need to talk." Maria felt a heavy weight settle in her chest, yet she knew this was not something she could avoid. She had done everything for her son, but now perhaps it was finally time to face the truth. If she wanted to preserve what remained of their relationship, she would have to say things she herself had long avoided confronting. The small cafe where Maria and Ben met that day no longer carried the warmth it once had. The atmosphere felt strangely cold, mirroring the quiet turmoil inside Maria's heart. She walked in and saw Ben already sitting in the corner. His face no longer carried the lightness it once had. Only silence and exhaustion remained. The two of them sat across from each other without speaking. The only sound was the soft clinking of coffee cups touching the table, small fragile sounds breaking through the stillness of the room. "Mom, I understand what you are doing," Ben finally began, his voice dry and restrained. "I know you want what is best for me, but why can't you see the difficulties I am facing? You are always worried about the company, but you forget about me. You forget about the family." Maria looked at him and could not hide the disappointment in her eyes. She had tried so hard, yet Ben still could not understand. She had poured every ounce of energy into saving the company, yet he felt abandoned. She could not help feeling that she was failing as a mother. Still, Maria also understood that if she continued to shelter him, he would never learn the value of independence and responsibility. "I cannot live your life for you, Ben," Maria said softly but firmly. "I love you, but you must learn how to stand on your own. I cannot help you forever. You are grown now, and it is time for you to face the world outside." Ben remained silent, his eyes lowered as he stared down without speaking. Maria could clearly sense the pain inside him, but this was something she had to do. She had helped him too much throughout his life, and if it continued, he would never truly grow. Every step Maria took was filled with sacrifice, yet she could not continue living in the shadow of the past. She had chosen this path, and she would not step back. After a long moment, Ben finally raised his head and looked at Maria, his voice trembling slightly. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I have been left alone in this world, like no one understands me." Maria looked at her son and felt a sharp ache in her chest. She had done everything she could so that Ben might live a good life. Yet now she had to watch him struggle with loneliness and disappointment. No matter how painful it was, she had to follow through with her decision. If she truly wanted Ben to mature, she had to allow him to become independent. "Ben, I will always love you," Maria said quietly. "But you must understand that life is not always easy. I want you to be strong and face life's challenges instead of living under my protection forever." In the end, Ben stood up without saying another word. He left the cafe in silence and did not look back. Maria remained seated alone, feeling an emptiness rising inside her chest. She had said what needed to be said, yet the pain remained. The relationship between mother and son might never return to what it once was, but Maria understood that if she had not made this choice, Ben might never realize the meaning of true maturity. Maria eventually left the cafe and stepped outside, though her heart was still filled with tangled emotions. She knew she had done the right thing, yet the price of power and change was painfully high. To achieve what she believed in, she had to face losses that few people could ever truly understand. Still, Maria knew that no matter how much it cost, she would never turn back. Maria gazed out the window as gray clouds slowly drifted across the sky, leaving a dim and heavy horizon in the distance. She had not slept the night before, her mind spinning endlessly with thoughts and decisions unlike anything she had ever faced in her life. On this quiet morning, she could feel more clearly than ever the price she had to pay. Power never comes easily, and when you try to change an entire world, you cannot avoid the cost that follows. When Maria stepped into the office that morning, everything looked the same as usual. Yet inside her heart, it felt as if everything stood on the edge of a cliff. Although the company was moving forward according to the path she had carefully planned, The crises within her family continued to grow like cracks that could never be repaired. The relationship between her and Ben, between her and the Harrison family, seemed to have reached a point where nothing could truly restore it. She had done everything for the company, for the future of Harrison Industries, but the price she had to pay was an overwhelming loneliness. Her son Ben still could not understand his mother's decisions. He could not see that constant protection was not the way to preserve love. Ben's journey toward maturity had to begin with independence, yet that truth made Maria feel as if her heart was being torn apart. Day after day, Maria forced herself to remain strong and refused to allow weakness to take control. She had once been a woman who fought through every hardship life placed before her, but now it felt as if everything was slowly slipping from her hands. This was the price of power she had to face. She could not spend the rest of her life living in the shadow of sacrifice. One morning, while Maria was reviewing the company's financial reports, her phone rang again. On the other end of the call was James Harrison, and this time his voice was no longer as cold as before. "Maria," he began, "I would like to talk with you. Perhaps we need to find a way to resolve the situation." Maria let out a quiet sigh. She had known this conversation would eventually come. Even though James had agreed with most of the reforms she had introduced in the company, he was still quietly searching for a way to regain control. This was a battle of strategy that Maria could not afford to overlook. What she was doing did not only affect Harrison Industries, it also shaped the future of the entire Harrison family, including James himself. "Can we meet this afternoon?" Maria replied calmly, without showing any surprise. "I will prepare all the necessary documents so we can discuss everything clearly." When the call ended, Maria could not shake the uneasy feeling inside her. James had begun moving again with his own intentions, and she knew this confrontation was unavoidable. But Maria had no other choice except to continue walking the path she had chosen. She held the power now, and it was time to demonstrate her strength. No one could easily take away what she had built. That afternoon, Maria met James at a quiet cafe where they could talk without interruption. As they sat across from each other, James looked at her with a gaze filled with suspicion. Maria could sense the tension in the air. She understood that for James, change was never something easy to accept. "Maria," James began, his voice deep and carefully measured, "I am not opposing the changes you are making, but we need to reconsider several issues. Our company cannot keep changing like this forever. It will create instability, and I am not certain that all of your decisions are entirely correct." Maria did not respond immediately. She remained silent and looked straight into James's eyes. She knew he had never truly accepted the changes she was implementing. Even though he appeared polite on the surface, deep inside he had no intention of giving up his power. Maria understood that she could only win this battle if she showed undeniable strength. "James," Maria finally said with firm determination, "the company must change. If we refuse to change, we will fall behind and lose the ability to compete with others. That is the reality you must face." James opened his mouth but said nothing more. He understood that no matter how much he objected, Maria now held control. She was not the weak woman he could easily manipulate. When the conversation ended, Maria stood up and prepared to leave, but not before delivering one final statement. "If you truly care about the future of this company, then help me take it to the top. If you cannot do that, I will do it alone." Maria walked away feeling as if she had just crossed an important threshold. She had spoken words that James could not openly challenge, and she understood that from this moment forward, the company would truly be under her control. Yet, as she stepped outside the cafe, she felt her loneliness grow even heavier. She had confronted the people closest to her in life, and now she could clearly feel the price of power. When Maria returned to the office, she sat alone in the dim room and reflected on everything that had just happened. She knew every decision she made carried a cost. But in life, the price of power cannot be avoided. She had chosen this road, and no matter how difficult it became, Maria would continue moving forward. Maria sat in her office as the light from the desk lamp cast overlapping streaks of brightness across a table covered with documents. She looked at the numbers in the company's financial reports, numbers that made her ask herself the same question every time she saw them. Was she truly walking the right path? Everything had changed. The company was moving forward. Employees now understood they could no longer rely on old strategies, yet Maria felt a deep emptiness growing inside her. The decisions she had made over the past months had not only affected Harrison Industries, but also her own family. A wave of exhaustion rose inside her. Part of her wanted to stop, yet another part kept pushing her forward. Maria had overcome too many hardships throughout her life, and now she could not stop when everything was only just beginning. Her meeting with James Harrison yesterday still echoed in her thoughts. He still could not fully accept the changes, even though he had reluctantly acknowledged the power she had gained. Maria knew that for James, power was something he never wanted to surrender. But now Maria was no longer the weak woman he once believed she was. She was the one in control, and she would not allow anyone, whether James or anyone else, to stand in her way. Yet a part of her still could not stop thinking about Ben. The relationship between mother and son now felt like a wound that had never healed. She had done everything for her son, yet he still could not understand the decisions she had made. The feeling of failure as a mother continued to linger inside her. Maria loved Ben deeply, but she also knew that if she kept protecting him, he would never grow up. That was why she had cut off financial support, so he would be forced to stand on his own and take responsibility for his life. One morning, while Maria was preparing for an important meeting, her phone rang again. It was Ben. She could not escape the heavy feeling in her chest, but she knew she had to face it. They needed to talk. She did not know where this conversation would lead, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. "When are you free? I want to talk to you," Ben wrote in the message. Maria stared at the screen and felt a powerful wave of emotion rise inside her. No matter what happened, she had to face her son and the truth behind the decisions she had made. She could not continue living in stagnation. Everyone had to change, and Ben could not be the exception. That afternoon, Maria arrived at the cafe Ben had chosen for their meeting. The atmosphere between them was still tense. Ben sat across from her, sadness filling his eyes. Maria could not help noticing the change in her son. He was no longer the child she had cared for and protected all those years. He was now a man facing a reality he had never been prepared for. "Mom, I cannot keep living like this," Ben began, his voice choking with emotion. "It feels like you have abandoned me. You cannot keep doing everything for the company and forget about me like this." Maria looked at her son and felt the pain behind his words. Every sentence felt like a blade cutting into her heart. But she knew this was something she had to do. If she did not, Ben would never understand the value of independence. She had done everything to give him a good life, yet he still could not see that constant help was not always the answer. "Ben, I love you, but you have to understand that I cannot live your life for you," Maria said quietly but firmly. "You are grown now, and you must learn how to stand on your own. I want you to succeed, but only when you walk forward on your own feet." Ben remained silent, his eyes filled with tears. Maria felt a deep sorrow inside her, but she could not change her decision. It was the hardest thing a mother could ever do. Yet she understood that only in this way would Ben truly understand life. A mother cannot always be the shield. Sometimes she must become the guide. "You do not understand me," Ben whispered, his voice filled with disappointment. "I do not want to live alone. I do not want you to abandon me." Maria could only look at him, feeling the ache in her heart. She had done everything she could, but her son's growth had to come from his own steps. She could not carry everything for him forever. Their relationship, no matter how painful, had to change. "You will be fine, Ben," Maria said, her eyes never leaving his. "I will always love you, but you must walk your own path. You can do it. I believe in you." In the end, Ben stood up without saying another word. He left in silence while Maria remained sitting alone in the cafe. She could not help feeling the emptiness growing inside her chest. Yet she knew this was the truth she had to face. If nothing changed, if Ben was never forced to take responsibility for his own life, he would never truly grow. And that was the one thing Maria wanted most for her son. Maria sat in her office as darkness slowly settled outside the window. The sparkling lights of the distant city had faded into faint streaks of glow. It was already late at night, yet she still could not stop thinking about the turmoil she had just gone through. The decisions she had made, although driven by clear reasons and purpose, were not without pain. She had walked through countless challenges and faced many hardships, but this was perhaps the greatest test of all. Her meeting with Ben the other day still lingered in her mind. His final words felt like a cut across her heart. Even though she understood that what she had done was for his future, so he could learn to stand on his own and grow into a stronger man, somewhere deep inside Maria, there remained a hollow feeling, as if a part of her had quietly shattered. She could not deny that her love for Ben was still as strong as it had always been. But love was not only about protection. She had devoted her entire life to her family and to the company, yet perhaps she had overlooked something most important: her own freedom. The relationship between her and Ben could never return to what it once was, and perhaps that was the price she had to pay for change. Maria had not chosen an easy path, but she could never allow herself to regret it. A week after the meeting with Ben, Maria still felt the emptiness lingering inside her. She had decided to stand up and rebuild everything again, but the price she had to pay was a loneliness that no one could truly share. The company was moving in the right direction, yet her family relationships were growing more strained by the day. She could not stop asking herself whether she was truly doing the right thing. Every decision she made sent new waves through the family, through the company, and through her own soul. One morning, Maria received a call from her assistant. "Maria, there is an urgent meeting with the company's shareholders this afternoon. They want to discuss the recent changes." Maria could hear the concern in her assistant's voice. Even though she had prepared herself mentally for this moment, she still felt a rush of tension move through her. Meetings like this did not always end the way she hoped. "Thank you. I will be there on time," Maria replied calmly, although inside she could not quiet the uneasiness. When she arrived at the meeting, Maria immediately sensed the tension in the room. The shareholders, people who had once trusted her completely, were now looking at her with doubt in their eyes. Some of them were no longer satisfied with the changes she had implemented. Even though the company was recovering, the reforms had been strong and fast. For many of them, the sudden shift was difficult to accept. "Maria, we respect the decisions you have made so far," one of the shareholders said with a serious tone. "But we need to understand more clearly what your next plans are. Will these changes truly bring long-term benefits to the company?" Maria looked at the shareholders, her gaze steady and unwavering. She knew this was the most important moment to prove that she had chosen the right path. She stood up and began presenting her long-term strategy, clearly explaining the goals she had set and demonstrating how the company's transformation would help Harrison Industries rise to the top of the real estate industry. She spoke about expanding into new markets, about new investment strategies, and about how the company would reshape itself in the coming years. "The changes I have implemented are not impulsive decisions," Maria said confidently. "We are building a strong foundation that will allow the company to grow sustainably. If we refuse to change, we will only remain where we are and lose every opportunity ahead of us." The meeting ended in silence. Maria could not be certain whether she had fully convinced the shareholders, but at least she had shown them that she was prepared for every challenge ahead. She knew these changes would never be easy, and if she wanted to succeed, she would have to face constant resistance. But that reality did not discourage her. After the meeting ended, Maria returned to her office. She sat alone in the darkness as the light from her computer screen illuminated her tired face. Life was never easy. The changes she had made affected not only the company, but also her own life and her family. Sometimes she felt as if she had lost a part of herself in this battle. Yet if she had not done it, she would never have been able to save the company. While Maria was lost in thought, her phone suddenly rang again. It was a message from Ben. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything that happened. I know you did everything for me. I can't imagine the difficulties you've had to face." Ben's apology stirred a surge of emotion within her. She had been waiting for these words for a long time, and now that they had finally arrived, she did not know how to react. Maria stared at the message for a long moment before replying. I'm sorry to Ben. I will always love you, but you have to understand that I did everything for our future. I cannot protect you forever. Ben did not respond immediately, but Maria could feel that at least he had begun to understand a part of her sacrifice. Those apologies, though late, were the first step toward healing the wounds within her heart. As night fell, Maria sat quietly in the darkness and felt something shifting inside her. She had walked through many battles, and no matter how much she had lost along the way, she would not stop now. This was only the beginning. She had chosen this path, and no matter what price she had to pay, Maria would continue moving forward without turning back. Thank you for following this emotional and dramatic story. Maria has gone through harsh challenges, facing loneliness, loss, and difficult decisions, yet she never gave up. What Maria experienced is truly a lesson about the power of determination and sacrifice, as well as the price of power and personal growth. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. What can you learn from Maria's journey?